I wasn't able to kind of make decisions and stand by them. I had a really deep sense of sort of imposter syndrome. My confidence sort of plummeted. I was kind of questioning myself, things that I was doing.
Because the moment I was like, no, I'm not going on payroll, I need to invoice. They were like, oh, and let's add, I had my child at 16. So I was more like, no, I can't do that. They're like, child, why is everything wrong with you? You're holding a baby and holding an invoice.
And I spent the money on the offices, and we were getting it all kitted out, and we had a launch and everything, and literally within 4 weeks the turnover plummeted. And I kept thinking next month it'll be better, and started ploughing in money to keep the business going, to keep the staff on.
I didn't really have that much money. I had my savings, but I don't come from a family of privilege. I come from a working class family. So I had all of these kind of barriers that at the time I didn't realise were barriers. I just got on with it and just moved. I moved without thinking. I had an idea.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of She's the Boss Female Entrepreneur Stories, where I interview phenomenal women from the world of entrepreneurship and business. As usual, if you haven't already done so, make sure you click that subscribe or follow button so that you're the first to know when I release a new interview. And if you're not already following on social media, make sure that you give me a follow on Instagram. It's at She's the Boss UK. On Twitter, it's at She's the Boss INTL. And on LinkedIn, I'm Daniela Genus. Facebook, it's Daniela Genus, She's the Boss. And make sure you give me a follow so you can see some of the other content that I share relating to business and entrepreneurship. Today, I'm really excited because I am joined by Venandah Madanhi, who is the founder of Talk About, an entrepreneur and a lawyer. Venandah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Daniela.
What a resume. Tell me more. So I suppose tell us first about Talk About and how that came about, and then tell us how that links in with you being a lawyer.
Oh, that's a big question. So I am, as you've already said, the founder of Talk About. And Talk About was an idea that came up to me when I was about 18, just when I was starting university. And this was inspired mainly by my work that I used to do with Sky News at the time. And I covered different things that was happening in politics, really helping young people get to understand what was happening. And then I used to have colleagues who'd come up to me and say, oh, V, we saw you on TV and I didn't understand that, this was happening in time for the general election, or that this was an issue I needed to care about, but you explained it so clearly. And in my head, I started thinking, all of the large corporations that we see would go such a long way if they didn't just target their ideal customer when they're at that ripe stage that they need to get the most out of them, but if they started a little bit earlier. And by that I mean, let's take an example like Sky News. If you want to get more people buying your broadband, more people buying Sky TV, etc., you're going to target people who are already working, already established, maybe even family people. But before that, those family people were once young people. They were once, not necessarily your ideal customer, but eventually you have to start working to win them over. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, I noticed that as young people, we grow an attachment to organizations. And just sticking on that Sky example, an example is, even now, I no longer do the work with Sky, but whenever I know, okay, Boris is talking at 8 p.m., I instinctively go to watch it on Sky News. If I know, something is happening in the media, I instinctively go to watch on Sky News, even though BBC is right there, ITV, Channel 4, you name it. And they're both giving you the same product at the same time with nothing else that's quite different. But I go to the one that I've almost formed an attachment or relationship with since I didn't necessarily need to be a customer. So without realizing it, I'm already a customer or an ideal customer, because if I did want to get broadband or Sky or anything, I would start thinking, maybe I should go to Sky. So that's where the initial inspiration for Talk About came. But then it was a bit tricky because I knew, okay, I want to create a platform that young people can rely on, that young people can keep returning to, that they can know, okay, if I want to learn something new or feel like I'm not dumb for not knowing something, where can I go? So I thought, okay, I'll create Talk About. But then over time, I just wanted to blend it with my growing passion for tech, and it's been quite a journey. So now we've gone from being this platform that really wants to give young people a place to amplify their voices to being able to provide engagement solutions that connect young people and professionals to not just young people, but corporates as well.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. What a story. I love how you just casually dropped in, yeah, when I used to do work with Sky. Like it's a small thing. That's a big deal. So I'm going to go back before I continue on the line of talk about. Tell us more about that. How do you start working with Sky? Sky is a big organization. What was the journey there?
I was almost headhunted, actually. So I started advocating for young people when I was 14. And this was when I became a youth counsellor. And it's because the teacher was just like, Venandah, you talk too much. And I was just like, yeah, I do. You know, you're just kind of that kid that's just always for a good time. That's literally me to a T. And he was like, you know, you talk too much. You talk all the time. Why don't you do something about it? Why don't you stand and be elected as youth counsellor for the city? And instinctively, even though I was someone who used to talk a lot, I was very shy. And I'd had previous experiences of stage fright where I stood on stage, didn't say anything, had everyone staring at me. It was horrific. So automatically I was like, no, I don't want to do it, because I knew I'd have to take a picture. My face would be not just in my school, but all the other schools. Young people would have to vote for me. And these are not, at that point, it wasn't just these are young people, those were my peers. And as a kid, you just kind of want to be accepted. You don't want to stand out too much. But this teacher's very persistent. And he managed to motivate me to just sign up. And I thought, okay, just going to sign up because he's on my case. People aren't going to vote for me anyway, so that's fine. So I won't have to go through the full process. I'll just suck it up this much. And little did I know, I got elected to be the youth counsellor for Wolverhampton South East. And since I got elected when I was 14, and I stuck with them for, I think, another 3 years. And then I later became the secretary and then the chair of the whole Wolverhampton Youth Council for all the different areas, working with our local MPs. And throughout all these years of being a youth councillor and a youth member of parliament, I just got comfortable with being uncomfortable, or comfortable with always not knowing, but knowing that I could ask questions. And later on, when I left youth council, because I went into sixth form, I was really busy, they took us on a trip, and it was at the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce, so the RSA. And they had all the fellows there, and I was, you know, when you're just like a kid and you're thinking, wow, this book is amazing. All these people know their stuff. And we were watching the head of Sky News being interviewed by the CEO of the RSA. And he was talking about what they wanted to do with the organisation, where they're taking the business. And they opened the floor up to some questions, and I put my hand up. And I've always been that person where if I have a question, I genuinely always ask questions that I want to know the answer to. So the likelihood is if I can Google the answer, I'm probably not going to ask it. And that means that if I do ask a question, I genuinely will pay attention to what you're saying. So I asked him, you know, you guys want to engage a young audience, you want to do more, but how are you going to compete with the likes of Instagram, Facebook, you name it, all these other places where instinctively we go to our news at Twitter? Not, you know, when you're a kid, you're not thinking, let me log into Sky News and see what's happening there. And after I asked him that question, he answered the question, which was fine. And then the next lady who was asking the question, she was like, oh, before I ask my question, young lady in the crowd over there, I'd like to talk to you after. And like, obviously, you know, when you're a kid, you're like, I was just like, it was such a weird moment. So I was just like, okay. And then at the end of it, she came up and she gave me my first writing opportunity. And I wrote my first ever article that got published when I was 16 for her. And I wrote about education in girls. And then on that same day, after she approached me, the head of Sky News later also came up to me and was like, oh, you know, Venandah, if you ever want to talk Sky News, you know, he really liked my question. And he was like, you know, me and my peers could come and visit Sky News any day just to see what it's like, to see if we wanted to one day work at Sky News. So we're like, cool, whatever. You know, as a kid, you don't take it too far. I was like, what a nice guy. I went home, and then on Twitter, someone DM'd me. And like this man DM'd me like, hey, do you want to get involved in stand-up? And I was just like, Mom, an old man wants me to get involved in comedy. So I was just like, no, sorry, I don't do comedy. And then he was just like, no, I mean stand-up be counted for Sky News. And I was like, oh. And that's how ultimately I got involved. So it was quite nice that they liked that I was quite inquisitive and willing to ask hard questions. And later on, I just kind of stayed with them covering news and occasionally doing work experience here and there over the years. So it was just an accidental thing that happened, and I ended up being a founding contributor for their platform.
Wow. What an amazing journey. And we're not even at the end, well, obviously we're not going to be at the end, but we've not even started to cover everything, because in addition to that, I know that you recently started law school.
Yeah.
So how does that fit into the whole thing?
Do you know, it's been so crazy. I've just been reflecting on it, I think, over the weekend with my mum and my auntie, and I was just telling them that they were talking about how 3 weeks ago I was literally, everyone thinks I'm joking when I say I was crying my way through law school. I had the laptop open, books open, tears streaming down my face, but still, you know, when you show up to every class, and I think it's been quite difficult at the beginning, because obviously I graduated in 2018, took 2 years out where I was working in business strategy, so I was already used to the working way of doing things, already used to managing my calendar, you know, just managing your day-to-day life and your business. And then next thing I know, I'm having to do everything I was doing before, and law school, and the course I'm doing is really intensive. So usually it takes people 9 months, maybe 2-3 years to do it. I'm doing it in 6 months because of my cohort. So it's 45 hours a week of studying alongside working, and me. I'm one of 5 siblings as well. So I have to make time for my family. So it has been a challenge. And I think that's one of the things that I wish growing up we'd hear more women in business talking about, okay, you know, it's fantastic being a boss, it's exciting, it's thrilling, but 7 times out of 10, some of the times it's very difficult. And that's when I really had to sit down and ask myself, you know, what am I doing with my time? Is what I'm doing beneficial? Is what I'm doing actually something that I want to be doing? And I think now I not only schedule my life away by the hour, but I'm very intentional to the things that I do, and knowing that I'm not just doing this thing, it's a part of my, you know, when time is going, it's a part of your life that you're given towards something, and I want to be able to do something and give my all. So it's been very difficult, but I think being strict with my priorities and planning as much as I can is something that I'm really starting to get into the swing of things.
I do a lot of things, but the concept of doing what I do now and then adding law school on the top of it just blows my mind. So clearly you are very diligent, you're very determined, and you're very focused, because otherwise I just don't know how that would work. And I agree with you. And one of the motivations for me doing the She's the Boss series is because I think, quite rightly, as you said, there's a lot of kind of emphasis on being a boss and making money and this kind of hustle culture, without talking about the tears, the hardships, and the challenges that we go through as women in business. And I think it's really important, and I'm really happy that you shared the fact that, yes, you're doing this, but I've also started this and I cried because it was hard. I don't think enough people speak openly about the tears that we share on this journey. So thank you for that. So the question I was going to ask was, how do you manage it all? But obviously you've said that you time block, which well done for that, because I love time blocking, and scheduling your time into hour slots and 45-minute slots, I think, is a great way to make sure that you complete everything in your day. But how do you stay focused on, I suppose, completing your studies, but also doing your business? Do you have a team that you work with? How is that being managed?
I have a fantastic team. I think one of the things that I can say throughout this whole journey in business that I really value is my team, because, you know, yes, they do their jobs and they do their jobs well, but one of the best things about having a team is, you know, when you yourself feeling low on motivation, or you're feeling like, I don't know if I can do this. Being around other people are like, oh my gosh, it's really exciting. We're working on this. Oh, we've had this happening. Or, you know, even just someone coming up with an idea. It's what keeps me going. And they're really talented. And I love working with young people. So the majority of my team are professionals. And these are people who have skills that they want to develop or skills that they want to try and put towards something new. And I think that's really worked well for our organization, because being able to help young people alongside corporates, it's been a really good blend of people really come to bring that to life. So we've got some that look at the marketing and what we're doing, but also a brilliant tech team who look at our platforms, how that's working. Is it actually a good experience for our users? Mm-hmm. And then we've got our international community of contributors. So it's been fantastic having a good team that can cope with growth and cope with startup culture, really.
Mm-hmm. How did you build that team? Because one of the key challenges that I openly speak about on this platform is that when I was building my first business, recruitment for me was just not one of my strong areas. And actually, I really didn't like having to be a manager. I felt that I was too soft. I wasn't a very good judge of characters. There was a host of reasons why I don't think I was very good at it. And because of that, although I had some really great members of my team, I also had some people that just was never supposed to be there. How have you navigated that? And are you a good judge of character?
Do you know, I'm so glad you've said it, because I'm tweeting, like I tweet a lot, but I'm always tweeting that one of the hardest things about being in business is managing people, because, you know, usually the old-fashioned way of leading is very much my way or the highway. This is how I want everything done. This is what I want it done by. Whereas, like, what I found quite challenging but also rewarding is having to know that, okay, Venandah, you want this task done, you want it done like this, but how someone gets there, I've had to learn to be flexible in that I've got members of my team who have anxiety, so they don't speak. But one thing that I can tell you is their work is second to none. The standards are high. So we'll speak by, you know, in one-to-one sessions, not group sessions, or we'll speak typing. That takes me a little bit longer compared to, say, if I usually just, you know, we had a quick conversation with a group of people. But part of being a manager, which I've had to learn, is you need to adapt to a certain extent for every single member of your team. And which is good, but also, as you can imagine, it's really time consuming. But I found it's helped me to make sure that I'm not just recruiting people who I feel complement my style of working, but I'm recruiting people who are capable of doing that job. And then the rest of the culture and the how we get there is just, you know, the stuff that makes it. It's easier done that way compared to if I was to recruit someone who I'm like, this person's such good vibes that we just get each other. They are, you know, my type of person to a T. That's been difficult because I've had situations like that where I've worked with people like that. But one thing that I've realized is I don't enjoy firing people. I don't enjoy letting people go, but sometimes it has to be done. And that's a skill that I've had to learn through the help of my mentors. But in order to avoid that, now what I do is really focus on what skills will this person bring to the table. So I really look at it at a case of what outputs am I going to get? How do they feel about overall mission? So why do they actually want to be here? So that I know, you know, if we weren't making money, would they be motivated to think, okay, let's get the revenue going, and I've got this idea and this idea and this idea. Let's do it together. And usually from that process, I can either filter out the people who are really passionate about the concept, but technically they don't have anything to actually bring to the table. And also the people who have technical ability, but their motivation and their willingness to actually contribute to the bigger framework isn't there. But I've really had to learn that through trial and error. And one of my mentors really told me at the beginning, when you're finding your team, figure out what is it that you as an individual, as the founder bring to the table, and what areas are you a little bit weak on, and get people that complement those areas. At least you know what those areas are, and worst case scenario, if it was marketing, I could do it. I could do a little bit of graphics, I could edit something, but the ideal thing is for me not to do that, because I know that I've got someone in my team who can do it better. So that's how I've kind of navigated that situation.
That sounds very much like my post from Instagram this morning, talking about identifying what you're good at and what you're not good at, and getting people that I suppose complement it and can fill in those gaps of the areas that you're weak in. So I think that's very, very valuable and useful advice and information. So you mentioned that you had a mentor or mentors. How important has having mentors that you can go to been on your journey? What's the impact that that's had?
It's been such a massive impact. I cannot stress it enough. For example, the first piece of work that we did for corporate, we had one of my mentors did an introduction. And I think sometimes, having someone to tell you, okay, you can actually do it, and here's some people that you can actually speak to, and I have faith in you, and I will advocate for you. So I think one of the really important things, alongside them being able to give really great advice, is having someone to advocate for you when you can't advocate for yourself. And that's usually more so the case when you're starting out with your business and you're yet to get the nice figures that will get the next client in through the door, or you're yet to have, the different clients and the logos on your website that will get people thinking, okay, I want to work with these people. That goes a really, really long way. And I think another thing that mentors help out with is imposter syndrome, because we all get it all the time. And I remember the other day I was talking to my peer mentor, actually, and we were talking about how suddenly I went through this phase, I think about 2 weeks ago, and I was thinking, oh, will clients actually take me seriously because I'm a young person? And he actually had to remind me, Venandah, did you not do a Tedx talk about how young people can solve problems? And I was like, yeah, I did. And, having someone who will pause you at your points of doubt and not necessarily tell you that they're not valid, but say, okay, I understand where this is coming from, but this is where you need to move towards if it's in terms of your mindset. And this is some of the things that you sometimes may forget about yourself that I'd like to remind you. And I think that's been one of the things that's really important, because I am not someone who tends to pause to appreciate how far I've come, or usually I complete a task and then I'm like, on to the next one. So you don't really get time to pause and smell the roses. And one of my mentors, he's always like, Venandah, what have we achieved this month? And I'm just like, meanwhile, I've come to talk about the next thing I want to work on. And I think those people who not only push you, but also give you a time to say, hold on, pause, reflect, what have we learned, where are we trying to go? It's so invaluable. And I'd encourage people, wherever you can get a mentor, get a mentor. And they don't always have to be a mentor within your own area. It can just be someone with a bit more life experience, or like a sounding board, really.
No, I'm a huge advocate for mentoring, so I can second that. There's a few points, and I don't know if you can see me scribbling away. I have a tendency to forget my questions, and you made a few valid points that I want to come back to. So the first, I'm going to double back. You said that you had to fire someone, or you fired people. I'm not going to ask for exact, obviously, names and numbers and all that. But I personally, in my previous business, had to experience firing people. And again, I've mentioned on previous interviews that the first person that I needed to fire, I got a member of staff who was also my friend to do the firing, because I felt so awkward about having to say to somebody, look, you're not doing a good job, it's time to leave. How did you find the experience of doing it the first time, and were there any strategies that you employed, for example, sending somebody else in to do it?
I think the first one, I definitely did that one by myself, and the ones after that one, actually. And I spoke to my mentor, who conveniently is a global head of HR. And I texted him, I was like, hey, it's me again, back for some advice. This time I need to learn how to let someone go. And what I did was really figure out, what are some of the really great things about this person? What do they do that's really done well? However, what are they also doing that isn't being done as well? And what's the impact of them not delivering having on the rest of the team, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So then after doing that, I just booked in a call and I just asked them, how are you feeling about, working at Talk About? Are you enjoying what we're doing? Are you enjoying where we're going? And they were like, yeah, it's just great. But sometimes a bit difficult.
That sounds like it make it more awkward.
Exactly, because you'd be like, it would be easy if they were like, oh, I hate it. You'd be like, great holidays. But in that situation, I was like, okay, and how do you feel you're managing the time? So what I did was always keep it based on their work and what they need to do, what they're there to do and what they're not doing, rather than get involved in, say, personal characteristics or things that technically, if they were still doing their work, would that matter as much? Mm-hmm. Unless, for example, you're letting them go because they've been, abusive or racist or whatever it is. Then
situation.
Yeah, then it's a bit more, you just kind of have to give them clear examples of where they've displayed that behavior and why it is that you won't tolerate it. So I think what was really scary about it is a lot of these people, the first people I had to let go were people that joined when we first started. So they joined when you had nobody, but you had them. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
But as you grow, sometimes the people that get onto the bus at the first stop aren't the ones that will stay for the full journey. And it's being okay with that. And actually, when I was giving them that message, making it okay to have lighter moments. Like, I like to laugh. I like to keep things light, because at the end of the day, just because I'm letting you go doesn't mean I don't want to see you succeed. And even, for example, the last person we let go, it just wasn't the right fit, because like what I said, startup culture is hard, it's demanding, and the person in question really loved structure. And it's nothing wrong on her part, but it's a case of, in the startup world, things are changing at such a rapid pace. You kind of just need to get with the program and make it work. However, in more corporate cultures, things won't change for like 9 months. It's more at a pace you can keep up with. So it's nothing. I made that clear in terms of, that's what she values. This is where we're at. And we would love to be able to meet you where you would feel valued, or where you'd feel like the organization accommodates you. But at this moment in time, that's not where we're at. And it would be a disservice to you to drag you along this journey that we know does not work for you. And in fact, it's actually going to make you feel like, I'm not able to bring my best. I'm not getting enough time to, process what I'm doing. And at the same time, I want to see my staff happy. I want to see them smiling. I want to see them thinking, I'm working on stuff and I'm delivering. And as soon as I feel like working in Talk About or working on anything that we're doing is taken away from your self-esteem and your confidence, I want to address that. Even if it means that we happen to be the toxic environment, or, for example, we're the environment that isn't complementary, if it's best for you, I really give them space to make that decision, but at times also understand that I need to make that decision based on what's best for my organization and the wider team. So yeah, that's how I process it.
So diplomatic, I love it. Meanwhile, I was in a corner like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Leanne, can you fire him for me, please?
Now it's a lot easier because we've got checks and balances in place.
Yeah.
So before, I used to work with people that I just knew, we're good vibes or get along, we can do this. And now as things have grown and become more structured, having someone in between, so we've got our essentially chief operating officer, that's me, and then we've got Ash. Ash is fantastic in terms of the way that she oversees things. It's truly brilliant. But it also means if we're working with people within my team who I've known since I was in school or uni or you name it, we can keep that relationship and that friendliness. And when it comes to actually the managing and the task, that is also being done by someone who they may not necessarily have that emotional connection with. Yeah. And that's just another thing that I've put in place just from learned experiences to understand that, managing, in order to be a good manager, you don't always have to be the one giving the instructions or being able to spot someone's errors. You can have other people with those skills and trusting that they'll do the right thing and run things past you if they're not sure.
I love that. TEDx.
Yeah.
Huge achievement. Tell us more about that.
So I was really excited. I did a TEDx talk on 3 reasons why your next big client could be a kid. And this was kind of based on the different things that I've learned, having worked with young people, having worked with corporates, and just seeing the way that the world is changing. And one of the things that I really want to share with people is, gone are the days where you give somebody respect or you trust them because they've been in the job for 20 years, or they've been a professor for 30 years and they've had time to read all the books. You've got young people who are now reading all those same things, learning all those experiences in shorter bursts of time because of the access that we have to technology, and also who are learning stuff and not waiting too long to try things out because they are taking risks and thinking, you know, I haven't failed yet, so I've got nothing to lose, essentially. And I think that intersection between being young, unafraid, but also willing to innovate and get things wrong is where disruption really comes. And I just find that really exciting. So I wanted to at least inspire not just young people, but seasoned professionals, people who are at the top of their game, to think, you know, there's some talent that you can really spot if you don't let age hold you back in terms of thinking, my ideal person to work with is this age, has this level of experience, has this way of thinking, because you might be able to work with Tom, for example, who is 21 and has been working on some really cool stuff, grown a business on his laptop, or is really having a thriving online initiative, or has built this massive community that he can now monetize faster than we could before. So it was I really enjoyed the talk, and I hope that everyone else who watched it enjoyed it too.
No, very much so. I haven't watched it in full, but I watched the beginning of it and I was very, very, very impressed. So well done to you for that. My other question, before I get into the final part of the interview, your childhood. You're clearly a very tenacious, very focused, very determined individual. I want to ask, where does that come from? And is there anything when you look back at your childhood that you can say, okay, this person inspired me, or I was doing this and it's clear from the fact that I was doing that this was the path that I was going to go on? Like, is there any key things that stand out to you?
I think the bit that really stands out to me is the other day I was actually having a conversation with my mum, and we were talking about different things that happen in the world, and, you know, like some of the horrible situations that people are in. And I was like, oh, you know, I really struggle with the fact that I feel deeply. So if I spot something, I want to help. Like, I really want to solve that problem. Whereas like other people can see something and think, oh, that's really sad, and walk away. For example, it's like, one day it was raining and I was at home and I was just looking out the window and I was like, you know, I'm really grateful for shelter. And then I thought, there's homeless people outside and it's raining, and that hurt. You know, when it's like, I shouldn't be able to be so, you know, technically you just feel grateful, but you can kind of separate that. Whereas like I just feel for people very deeply. And my mum was like, you know, a lot of people question, oh, where does V get this passion for like helping people? She's always doing an initiative. I'm either doing a social action campaign, mentoring someone, talking to someone, trying to fix a problem, or crying my way through law school so I can go fix other people's problems. And I've always wondered, like, how come I struggle to not do anything if that makes sense. And then the other day my mom was like, when I was young, they realized that I would probably be passionate about helping people, because it got to a point where no one actually wanted to ask me to say grace before dinner. Because the moment they're like, oh, V, do you want to pray before we eat? I was like, yeah, cool. And best believe we were going to pray for the dinner and the sweet corn we were about to eat, or whatever it was. We were also going to pray for homelessness. We were also going to pray for earthquakes. We were going to pray for people. It was just, you know, at that point they were like, you know, she's very young to be thinking about these things consistently and worrying about them. So I think it's always been something that's been in my nature. And Over time, I really am grateful for my siblings and my mom and my dad, because I'm always so busy, and sometimes, like what I said before, I don't get the time to pause and reflect and smell the roses. It's okay. But my parents, no worries. But my family have always been there for me. And I think out of all of my values, I've got 3 main values. And my values are family, commitment, and integrity. And those are because, my family is so important to me. They keep me grounded, but they also make me very happy. And that's the way that I look at my work-life balance as well. When I look at Talk About, I don't just see it as a group of people I'm working with. It's a family. We're creating something that is aimed at solving some social issues. And when I look at everything else that I'm doing, I'm very busy, but I think about the value of commitment. And if I commit to something, I'm going to keep my commitments to my commitments. Mm-hmm. Because if I don't respect what I want to do for myself, how can I respect my commitment to Daniela? Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things I try to remember. And the last one that has really helped me throughout the years and throughout my childhood is integrity. Mm-hmm. And that's helped me to understand that, if I want to do something, I will do it because I want to and because I believe in the reason why I'm doing it. And the moment I feel like I'm doing something to appease someone else or trying to do it to just, to be fake about it, I have to ask myself, is this something that I should be doing? And integrity is very important to me in terms of making sure I maintain that value, but I really value seeing that in other people. And I have a lot of time for people with integrity. So those are the main things that throughout my childhood have kept me grounded. And I've just always been a kid with a lot of curiosity and who just genuinely wants to see the world be a better place. And however that happens, that's cool with me. Just happy to be on the journey.
I love that. What a beautiful answer to the question, and actually a wonderful segue into the final, the first of the final 2 questions. 3 pieces of advice that you'd give to a woman who's watching this, who's just started her business or is interested in starting a business. What advice would you give her above and beyond what you just said? Because I think those 3 values that you have are kind of advice as well, because I think upholding integrity and commitments, etc., I think that's great advice that everybody should be following. But what other 3 pieces of advice would you give?
To the woman who's thinking about starting a business, I would say, and I cannot stress it enough, do not start a business just for the sake of starting a business. So, for example, a lot of people can think, I want to start a business because I want the label of an entrepreneur. You have to ask yourself, do you want to do finances? Do you want to deal with pensions? Do you want to deal with, really making sure that everything balances, marketing and all of that stuff? And a lot of those things that sometimes are not necessarily the sparkly bits of business are things that as an entrepreneur and as a woman in business, you will have to wrap your head around and be able to do them well. And you do them well when you're excited about what you're doing. So whether it's a wig company that you're doing, or you're opening your own pharmacy, or creating ring lights, whatever it is you want to do, you will do not just the fun bits, but you'll do the admin bits with more excitement and more enthusiasm when you're doing the boring stuff, not because you have to, but because it's part of the bigger journey which you enjoy. Mm-hmm. So that ties in with, only start a business if it's something you genuinely want to do, and not just for the title, because the title won't keep you going when it's 3 a.m. and you're running on not even your last battery, but fumes and hopes and dreams. And then my second piece of advice would be, when you have your team, have fun with it, in terms of, these aren't just people you're working with who are, doing a task for you. You spend a lot of your time in your whole life at work. Mm-hmm. Get to know them as people. What colors do they like? What makes them tick? What styles or working patterns do they like to work in? And understand that at some points you also have to adapt. So you're on a journey, and be willing to accommodate others in the way that you would also like to be accommodated when you have your own quirky quirks that people need to respect as well. Mm-hmm. And my third thing for a woman in business is be strong in terms of what you want to do. So by that I mean, a lot of people will give you opinions, and as women, we sometimes feel like we need to accommodate people or bend over backwards because someone's not going to like what you're doing. Someone's not going to understand your business. Someone's not even going to think you're the best person to drive your business. But where I say be strong, I mean be strong in your conviction to what you want to do. So if you know, this is what I want to create. So at first, when I was starting to talk about, I was like, I want to help young people. And I'll start off by building a community. And I had so many people who were like, but Venandah, how are you going to make money? Like, where's the money bit going to come into it? And I was like, oh, it was a very valid question, but it was something that I knew I will figure it out as I go along, because in the grand scheme of things, I know the core of what I want to do is to help young people. How we do that, when we do that, what products we create to do that, it will come over time. But I knew I want to help young people and venture into tech. And now we have an education tech platform. And had I stopped 2 years ago because someone was like, well, where are you going to make the money? I wouldn't actually be here with a tech platform and calling myself not just a woman in business, but a woman in tech and a Black woman in tech. Mm-hmm. But I told myself, this is what I want to do. Not sure how we're going to get there, but I will learn along the way. And if I don't know, I will learn. And if I can't learn, I will find some people to help me. And that's what I mean with be strong. Hold on to your dream and hold on to those ideas, because once you're holding on, everybody else has no choice but to get on with the journey with you. Mm-hmm. So those are my 3 pieces of advice.
Fabulous advice. She's the Boss recommends a book that has had an impact on you, on your business career or on your life in general. What book do you want to share with our audience?
Oh, there's this book by Daniel Priestley.
Key Person of Influence.
Oh my gosh, yes.
One of my favorite books that I always recommend.
I love it so much. I cannot recommend it enough, because one of the things that it really helped me to appreciate is, there's value in what you're doing, and if you enjoy what you're doing and you do it well, then you can become a key person of influence. And it really changed the way that I look at what it means to be an influencer. And what that book helped me to do, alongside other stuff that I was reading at the time, was to understand not just what I want to do, but what I don't want to do. For example, a lot of people will be like, oh, V's in law. V, do you want to write a blog about law? No. V, do you want like it feels weird to people, but people ask me, oh, Venandah, do you want to blog about writing applications? And I was like, no. They're like, why, Venandah, you've made another? Because I hated every single second of law applications. And that's not me doubting the system, but that's me being honest. And I say that because I know, even though I did it, that doesn't mean that I'm the best person to advise someone else. In fact, yes, I can give you good advice, but someone else will give you even more impactful advice because they enjoyed the process. They took their time to understand it. As for your girl, I was winging it and praying and hoping for the best. And so I think genuinely understand that it's not everything that you have to do. And in fact, once you figure out what your no's are and what your yeses are, you can now navigate your niche. And when you find your niche, you put out things that are more impactful. So I love talking about engagement. I love talking about how people can really do more for their communities. And that's just exposed me to diversity and inclusion and all these other areas in tech and that stuff. It's exciting. And if it comes to one day becoming a person of influence in those areas, I'd be more than happy. So yes, I would recommend it to anyone who's just thinking, how can I learn more about myself, learn more about how to engage with other people, and make sure that my value is visible? 100% read the book.
I second, third, fourth that. It's one of the key books that I always recommend when I get a new client on board. Every client that I get on board, I say, go and get that book. In fact, I'm going to start giving it to them for free because I think it's just so important. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing and being so honest and open with your story. If people want to find out more about you, about Talk About, what platforms are you on and how can they find you?
So you can find out more about Talk About at www.talkabout.org.uk. And I am on socials. You can get me on Twitter, Instagram, at Venandah Madanhi. And on Instagram, I've already said Instagram. So for LinkedIn, you can find me at Venandah Madanhi FRSA. So that stands for Fellow of the RSA. So yeah, happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Honestly, a shining light, a beacon, a role model for women, for Black women. And I really just want to say thank you for everything that you've done at such a young age. You're just really remarkable. And thank you so much for coming on the She's the Boss platform.
No, thank you for having me. It's really exciting.
And thank you guys, as usual, for watching, for listening. If anything that Venandah has said today has resonated with you, or if you just want to say well done for being a boss and being the boss that she is, please write a comment. Please make sure that you like and that you share with anybody that you think needs to hear what Venandah has said in this interview. I'm sure that there's many people that could benefit from what has been shared. And as usual, click that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. To make sure that you don't ever miss out on another one of these fantastic interviews, because I must say, it's my platform, but the women that I've been speaking to just every week when I do these, and Venandah, you included in that, just blow me away. And you don't want to miss out. So make sure that you subscribe or you follow. And I'll be back next Sunday at 8 p.m. with another She's the Boss female entrepreneur story. And if you want to nominate a woman in business to be featured, drop me an email, Daniela at she'sthebossintl.com. Take care.